The scent hit first. Something in the sterile classroom, air-twisted warm metal, old blood, and something deeper, feral, not just dangerous, wrong. Jack stiffened before he even understood why. A few alien students gagged, one dropped their data tablet. Even the instructor, who had 7 decades of war diplomacy under her scales, paused mid-sentence and tilted her head toward the sealed entrance. It was behind that door. The guards stood rigid in full armor, hands on shock spears. Their breathing units hissed, fogging their visors. The words, "Live Demonstration," blinked on the hollow panel behind them, cycling slowly in 6 galactic dialects. Everyone had heard rumors. That the Dravniks were more than animals, that they'd been sharpened into something else. "Remain seated," the instructor barked, voice tighter than usual. "Do not make eye contact. Do not speak. Do not move unless instructed. This specimen is a conditioned predator, not a pet." Jack's stomach flipped. He wasn't afraid, not exactly, but his body remembered something before his brain did. That smell, that heat. No, it couldn't be. The hiss of the doors cut his thoughts clean in half. The cub entered. If you could call it that. It was barely shoulder-high to Jack, but thick with scar tissue, teeth exposed even at rest, eyes darting with the twitchy energy of something that had forgotten what peace ever felt like. Metal tags hung from its collar, each etched with numbers that meant nothing to Jack, but felt like a death toll. It stepped into the room, sniffed, paused. Then, like a magnet yanked from orbit, its head snapped toward him. And everything stopped. Jack didn't breathe. Neither did the room. The cub lowered its head, its muscles trembling, not with rage, but anticipation. Recognition. And then, without a growl or snarl, it padded directly across the floor. Toward him. The chair beneath Jack creaked as he instinctively pushed back, but it was too late. The creature was already there. The Dravnik, this twitchy, razor-born apex predator, slid to a halt at his feet, stared for one long breath, and then gently climbed into his lap. It was like someone had vacuumed all the air out of the room. Jack flinched, heart racing, back stiff, every instinct shouting at him to move. But the cub the beast just curled up, muscular limbs folded. Scarred flank pressed tight against Jack's ribs, and then it made a sound no one in that room had ever heard. A soft, low purr. Guards snapped forward. Students shrieked. The instructor dropped her datapad. The lockdown klaxon blared. The cub didn't move. Jack's hand hovered over its back, shaking. He should have pushed it off, should have called for help. But some part of him buried deep and rising fast already knew. "I think I know this one," he said, barely above a whisper. 4 months earlier. It had been a systems lockdown, the kind that traps everyone where they are. Jack had been working part-time as a junior technician during off-hours, part of the Academy's human exchange protocol. Less glamorous than it sounded. Most of his work involved fixing old cargo loaders and resetting stuck climate regulators in the lower sectors. That day, he was rerouting a power conduit behind Storage Bay 9 when the sirens went off. He had about 7 seconds to wedge himself behind a shipping crate before the blast doors sealed him in. It was dark, cold, and smelled like spilled fuel. At first, he thought the noise was just the wind cycling through the vent ducts, but then it whined, a high, wounded sound, like something trying not to be heard and failing. Jack followed it around a half-collapsed crate of synthetic protein bricks. That's when he saw it. It was smaller then, its ribs showed through a mottled gray hide, and its front leg dragged oddly. One eye was swollen shut. It was huddled behind a shipping bin, clearly injured, clearly terrified. He had no idea what it was. But it was cold. And scared. And he had half a protein bar in his jacket pocket. He didn't speak, just crouched, slowly broke the bar in half, and slid the bigger piece across the floor. The creature watched with both hunger and mistrust. But after 2 silent minutes, it limped forward and devoured it. Jack didn't move. It crept closer, sniffed at his boots, growled low when he shifted. Still, Jack didn't move. Eventually, he reached out slowly and scratched lightly behind what looked like an ear ridge. The creature froze, then leaned into it. "Buddy," Jack muttered with a shaky smile. "I'll call you Buddy." The lockdown lifted an hour later. By the time security made it down to the sector, the cub was gone. He never mentioned it. Now, in the middle of the classroom, Buddy, scarred, starved, and trained into something else, was curled against him again. "Security! Contain it!" barked the instructor. The guards advanced, but the cub's head shot up. It didn't snarl, didn't lunge, but the low, guttural sound it made froze everyone. It was not a warning. It was a promise. Two guards hesitated. "Don't touch him," Jack said, his voice steadier now. "You'll spook it." "It?" hissed a student behind him, Crixel, a Sorrel who'd already made his opinion on humans well known. "It's a weaponized predator. It doesn't get a name." Jack didn't respond. He was focused on the cub. It was watching him now, eyes softer. One huge paw rested over his thigh, possessive but gentle. It was heavier than he remembered, warmer too. A medical drone zipped in from the ceiling to scan the creature. It beeped twice, then displayed biometric data that sent the instructor stumbling back in horror. "Stage 4, behavioral override," she said hoarsely. "This cub was in the red pit rotation. They conditioned it through kill cycles. It's not supposed to be capable of this." "Well, it is," Jack muttered, rubbing the cub's flank gently, "because someone was nice to it once." "Get him out of there," came a voice from the doorway. New, commanding. Dean Sarlith of the Diplomatic Security Office stepped into the room, 4 bodyguards behind her. Her golden crest flattened in alarm as she saw the scene, but she didn't flinch. "Human, move away from the specimen," she ordered. Jack didn't move. "I said move." "It won't let me," he said honestly. "If I leave, it might panic. You said it was trained to fight, so don't make it think it needs to." Her eyes narrowed. One of the guards took a step forward. The cub growled again, louder this time, a sharp edge to the sound. Jack felt the vibrations all the way into his bones. "Back off!" he shouted. "It remembers me. I helped it months ago, during a lockdown. I gave it food, scratched its head. It wasn't a big thing. I didn't think it meant anything. But it remembered." Dean Sarlith's expression darkened. "You're telling me you tampered with a military predator specimen and failed to report it?" "I didn't tamper with anything. I thought it was a stray animal in the storage bay. There were no tags, no collar, nothing. It was limping and bleeding. So I gave it half a snack bar and went on with my day." "You shouldn't have gone on with anything. That cub was on transfer to the predator conditioning program. We lost track of it for 3 hours. That incident was classified." "Sounds like you lost track of more than just its location," Jack snapped. "You lost track of who it was." For a moment, the room was dead silent. Then the cub shifted again, rested its head on Jack's leg, and let out another low purr. Dean Sarlith's jaw clenched. "Initiate full lockdown," she said finally, "and get the ethics board on a call. We have a situation." The doors sealed shut. Jack exhaled, long and shaky. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the wrapper of an old protein bar he'd kept tucked in his jacket, lining half out of nostalgia, half out of habit. The cub sniffed it, nuzzled it once, and let out a contented sigh. And all across the room, alien eyes watched not with fear, but something far more dangerous to the institution that had built this monster. They watched with wonder. The lockdown lasted 6 hours. They tried to sedate the cub twice. Both times, the tranquilizer drone buzzed too close and triggered a low snarl that froze every being in the room. Not out of volume, out of certainty. The kind that made you instinctively know this creature would protect what it had claimed and Jack had been claimed. So they adjusted the plan. Emergency medical teams were called, not for Jack, but to assess the cub without provoking it. That proved more complicated than anyone expected. They rolled in a diagnostic stretcher with no moving parts, no sudden sounds, nothing that might be interpreted as hostile. A Gellery xenobiologist with transparent flesh and slow movements volunteered to approach, keeping low, voice gentle. Jack watched her closely. "I'm not going to hurt it," she whispered, kneeling a meter away. "I just want to check vitals, injuries, scarring." Jack nodded once. The cub looked at her, then at Jack. "Go on," he murmured, tapping his chest. "It's okay." Reluctantly, the predator lifted its head. Scanners passed over its body in silence. The readouts flickered in the air beside them. The Gellery's face paled. Her fingers trembled. "Scarring pattern matches Class D combat training," she said quietly, pointing to healed lacerations along the cub's flanks and spine. "Limb displacement on the left foreleg. dislocated, reset improperly. Internal splintering on 2 ribs, older fractures, healed without medical intervention. Right eye shows retinal trauma. The swelling's permanent. That isn't from one fight. The instructor, still pale, hovered behind her. You're saying this thing's been in active pit cycles already? 6 minimum, the Gellery said. Likely more. Jack flinched. The cub turned its head and nudged his shoulder gently, as if sensing it. I thought it looked bigger, he said hoarsely. It's been growing while they've been doing this to it? Growth stunted, malnourishment present, and wait. She leaned in, scanning the back of its neck. The holodisplay lit up again. There's a neuro-trigger implant buried here, she said. Conditioned response chip, meant to activate aggression on command. And it didn't? Jack asked. It should be active, she replied, but it's inert. Either the implant failed, or the subject's overriding it. The instructor took a step back. That's not possible. Well, it just happened, Jack muttered, petting the cub's head again. It leaned into his palm and huffed softly. By hour 7, Dean Sarlith returned. She didn't enter the room. Instead, she watched through the triple-pane observation window, arms folded, face unreadable. Jack was still sitting cross-legged on the floor, the cub snuggled into his lap like an oversized dog. He looked tired. Not in a dramatic way, just human, shoulders low, eyes heavy, the kind of tired that sank into your bones and stayed. You've caused a diplomatic incident, she said over the comm. I gave a scared animal a protein bar, Jack replied, not looking at her. That scared animal is classified military property. Jack raised an eyebrow. You own it? She paused. You treat it like you don't, that's the problem. She turned away. The ethics committee is reviewing the footage. We're convening a tribunal tomorrow morning. You'll attend. And buddy? Do not name it. Jack's eyes narrowed. I already did, 4 months ago. The room was cold again. Someone had turned the heat down standard protocol for psychological pacification. But the cub didn't seem fazed. It stayed pressed against Jack, chest rising and falling slowly, as if the presence of its human was all it needed. Jack had managed to scoot them both toward a padded bench near the wall. His legs were numb from sitting too long, but he didn't dare move the cub. At some point, an older alien he hadn't seen before entered the room. A Norin, long limbs, translucent fur, and the slow, gentle grace of someone who'd seen more than they let on. She wore a silver insignia on her robe, Academy ethicist. She didn't speak at first, just observed. Then, may I sit? Jack nodded. The Norin eased herself down across from him. I've reviewed the footage from 4 months ago, she said. From the storage bay. You didn't report the encounter. I didn't know what it was, Jack said. It was just small, hurt, alone. And now? Jack looked down at the cub. It's bigger, still hurt, still alone. She tilted her head. You understand the implications of what's happening? I'm not sure anyone does. The Predator conditioning program is one of the most closely guarded systems in galactic diplomacy, she said softly. Fear is a tool. The threat of unpredictable violence keeps certain sectors in line. These creatures' Dravneks were bred and trained to embody that threat. And now one's purring in my lap. Exactly, she said. You've shown that kindness can override what we believed was unbreakable programming. Jack hesitated. That's a good thing. It is, she agreed. But politically, it's chaos. Jack sighed. You're not going to kill it, are you? She looked at the cub, then back at him. Some factions believe the subject should be euthanized. Others are calling for behavioral dissection, disassembly of memory engrams, neural pattern mapping. Disassembly? They want to cut out whatever part of its brain remembers you. Jack's stomach twisted. And you? I want to understand it, properly, carefully, and ethically. He studied her for a long moment. Do I have any say? She smiled faintly. You're the only reason this creature didn't kill someone today. So, yes, Jack, you've earned a voice. The tribunal hall was packed. Representatives from 6 species, military observers, students, instructors, and press. Somehow, the footage had already leaked off-world. There were protest drones outside the academy gates by morning. Jack stood alone on the central platform, the cub locked behind a triple-reinforced shield to his right. Its ears twitched at every raised voice, but it kept its eyes on him. Sarlith stood on the other side. She made her opening statement with typical efficiency. The Dravnik was a failed specimen. Its bond with the human endangered lives. The only viable course was immediate decommissioning. When Jack was called to speak, he hesitated. His hands were cold, his throat dry. He wasn't a diplomat, he wasn't trained for this. But Buddy was watching him. So he stepped forward. I didn't train it, I didn't command it, I didn't do anything special. I found it scared and hungry, and I gave it food, scratched its head. He looked around the hall. Many aliens stared back with blank, unreadable expressions. Others shifted uncomfortably. It remembered, Jack said, voice rising. After months of starvation, violence, and conditioning, it remembered that moment. He paused. You built a weapon out of fear, but it took one act of care to remind it what peace felt like. Someone laughed bitterly from the delegation seats. It was Crixel, the same student from the classroom. Oh please, you think affection undoes a neural override? Jack looked at him. No, he said, but affection isn't an override, it's an anchor. That silenced the room. Jack took a deep breath. You can tear it apart to find what's different, or you can leave it alone and realize it's not broken, it's healing. He stepped back. There was no applause. Only silence. The verdict came hours later. The Predator conditioning program was suspended pending full investigation. The Cub was reclassified from combat asset to behavioral anomaly under protective ethical observation. Jack was not expelled, but he wasn't congratulated either. Officially, the ruling labeled his actions as unintentional interference, but the Academy quietly increased protocols on interspecies incidents. Jack noticed the new guidelines included a clause about unreported bonding. He didn't care. Because that night, for the first time since his arrival, he was not alone in his quarters. Buddy curled up beside his bed, no restraints, no muzzle, and let out a soft rumble as Jack lay down. Jack reached over and scratched behind its ear. Its tail thumped once, like a dog dreaming. And outside, for the first time in the Academy's history, a predator slept peacefully. Jack woke with a start. Not to alarms, not to shouting, but weight. A firm, warm weight across his chest. Buddy. The Cub had shifted in the night, half draped over him like an overgrown security blanket, breath warm against his ribs. Its eyes were closed, lips twitching in sleep, its tail swished slowly. Jack's first instinct was to freeze. Even after everything, the sheer mass of it kept catching him off guard. But it wasn't pressing down. It was curled protectively, like it had decided that this Jack's heartbeat was the safest place in the universe. Jack exhaled, barely a whisper. Too early for existential crises, pal. Buddy flicked an ear in response, but didn't move. Eventually, Jack managed to ease himself out from under the Cub's arm, stretch his legs, and limp to the small hygiene unit. His thigh ached from where Buddy had pinned it all night, and his back screamed in protest. He splashed his face with cold water. His reflection looked worse than he expected. Deep bags under the eyes, lips dry, shoulders hunched from sleeping in awkward positions for 2 nights straight. There was even a faint bruise where Buddy had stepped on him during the initial lockdown scuffle. He sighed. The door chimed. Jack flinched hard enough to knock the cup off the sink. It clattered against the tile, and before it hit the floor, Buddy was already up, growling. Jack stepped out, hands raised. It's just the door. Relax. The Cub didn't. Instead, it positioned itself between Jack and the entrance, low and coiled. Jack approached slowly and tapped the control. It was the Gellery xenobiologist again, the one who had scanned Buddy during lockdown. She stood with 2 assistants, both carrying medical cases. Her translucent skin flickered with cautious calm. I requested a private follow-up, she said, non-invasive, just observation and basic telemetry, no sedation, no extraction. Jack glanced at Buddy. The Cub was watching her intently. She's all right, Jack said, kneeling to touch its neck. You remember her, no needles. Buddy's eyes lingered on the medkits, then on the Gellery. After a long pause, it stepped back. Permission. The Gellery exhaled in relief. You weren't exaggerating. What? That it understands context, memory, associations. She stepped in carefully. That's not instinct, that's learned behavior and retained. They spent the next hour running scans, taking environmental readings, and documenting Buddy's responses to various tones, scents, and stimuli. One assistant accidentally dropped a plastic data pad, and Buddy instantly went stiff, growling low until Jack gently touched its back. "Easy," he said. "You're okay." The growl faded. Not immediately, but it faded. The Gellery shook her head. "This is remarkable. The hippocampal activity spikes on stimulus, but with you nearby, the aggressive markers drop off by half. And here." She rotated the scanner. "You see these lines? That's limbic system firing associated with social bonding. Not just tolerance, attachment. So you're saying he likes me. I'm saying he might need you." Jack froze. "And what happens when I'm not around?" She didn't answer. The next challenge came at 0900 station time. Dean Sarlith had ordered Jack to present Buddy in a controlled outdoor environment, a section of the campus botanical gardens converted into a behavioral assessment zone. It was surrounded by multi-tiered security fencing, guards in stealth armor, and 4 separate drone swarms on standby. "It's overkill," Jack muttered, adjusting his borrowed exovest. Buddy paced beside him, visibly anxious. The cub had refused to wear the recommended control harness. When one of the handlers tried to strap it on earlier, Buddy had snarled, teeth bared, and the room cleared in seconds. The ethics committee compromised, no harness, but Jack would wear a wrist link monitoring his vitals and issuing immediate alerts in case of distress. He hadn't signed off on it exactly, but no one had asked. The test started simple. Controlled exposure to unfamiliar stimuli, wind, moving foliage, other beings. 2 Zenthari approached with a hollow leash and a bag of scent samples. One of them crouched, offering a neural toy. Buddy sniffed it, then backed away. Jack frowned. "Try something warmer, natural, no synth fur." The handler exchanged it for a woven glove worn by Jack earlier that week. Buddy sniffed again. This time, it stepped forward. Not to take the glove, to push it back toward Jack. Jack blinked. "You want me to have it?" The cub growled lightly and nudged the glove at his leg. The handler took notes rapidly. Cognitive association established. Item considered belonging to bonded individual. Subject is offering it back. Sarlith watched from a distance, arms folded, no expression. But her eyes followed every movement. Next test, mild auditory stress. A control speaker played a clip of crowd noise, just under panic threshold. Buddy's pupils dilated, its tail twitched, but it didn't bolt. Instead, it pressed closer to Jack's side. Jack dropped to one knee. "You all right?" Buddy whined, and lowered its head. The crowd behind the fence murmured. "Behavioral deviation recorded," the Gellery announced from her station. "Dravnik species have no documented comfort-seeking behavior post-stress stimulus. Until now." Dean Sarlith stepped forward. "That's enough for today. Return the subject to containment." Jack stood. "He's not going back into a cage. He's still a Class C threat," she snapped. "He's not threatening anyone. Yet." Buddy growled low and dangerous. Jack stepped in front. "He reacts to tone. Don't yell." Silence stretched across the field. Sarlith stared him down. "You think a creature raised in blood, pits and starvation tanks is just going to unlearn all that because of a snack bar?" "No," Jack said, "but it remembered me through all of it. That means something survived." That night, a message came through his comms. Encrypted, no sender listed. He opened it. Just a phrase. He wasn't the only one. Attached was a short vid clip, blurry, possibly smuggled, showing a juvenile Dravnik in a shipping crate. It wasn't Buddy. It was another cub, cowering in the corner, flinching at every sound. But in the background, barely audible, someone was speaking to it gently. A different human voice. Jack played it 3 times before realizing this wasn't an isolated case. Someone else had shown kindness, and at least one other Dravnik had responded. He forwarded it to the Gellery immediately. Her reply was short. "If this is real, the entire conditioning model is compromised." The next morning, he found himself summoned to a closed-chamber meeting with the Academy's Intergalactic Ethics Council. 8 beings, 8 species, all influential. They asked him 2 questions. First, do you believe this Dravnik can be safely rehabilitated? Jack answered, "He's already doing it, you're just refusing to call it that." Second, would you be willing to remain his primary contact indefinitely? That one hit harder. Jack sat in silence for a while, thought about what it would mean his future, tied to a predator no one fully trusted, a being that might always struggle with instinct, that might never be safe, not in the traditional sense. But then he thought of Buddy's soft purring in the middle of the night, the way it pressed against his side when it heard wind chimes, the tail thump when it smelled protein bars. He nodded. Yeah, he said, I'd stay. One of the counselors, a species Jack didn't even recognize, let out a soft exhale. Then you've already proven what the conditioning program failed to account for. Jack frowned. What's that? Empathy isn't weakness, it's a memory, one strong enough to rewrite fear. That afternoon, Jack took Buddy out to the smaller garden wing, near the student housing blocks, fewer cameras, fewer watchers. They sat beneath the large fronded tree where sunlight filtered through pale leaves like stained glass. Buddy rolled onto his side, yawned. A group of alien students paused nearby. They watched silently, still skeptical, unsure whether to be amazed or horrified. Jack pulled out a protein bar, unwrapped it, and tore off a small piece. Buddy's ears perked up. He leaned over, offered it gently. The cub took it with the delicacy of a house cat, then rolled onto its back, belly exposed, tail wagging in slow, contented arcs. Someone in the group gasped. Jack just smiled and reached over. Yeah, he muttered. You win. Belly scratch as it is. It wasn't a protest. Not officially. But when over 100 students across 17 species gathered silently outside the Zenthari Diplomatic Academy's East Hall, holding signs with translations of the same word, remembered, it didn't feel like a debate anymore. It felt like a reckoning. Jack hadn't planned on speaking. He'd only come to walk Buddy. Morning routines, familiarity, peace, those were what mattered now. But the moment he stepped out into the courtyard and saw the crowd, and the moment they saw him, the murmurs started. Not in hostility, in expectation. Buddy, sensing the shift in attention, moved closer to Jack, pressing against his leg protectively. His eyes scanned the crowd, his body tensed. Jack scratched behind his ears. The cub relaxed. He didn't want to become a symbol, he really didn't. But apparently, that wasn't his choice anymore. One of the protest leaders, a Trenian named Solhi, normally mute from anxiety, held up a small data tablet and displayed an image of Buddy lying on Jack's lap during the lockdown. Beneath it, what was conditioned can still be unlearned. Jack sighed, then stepped forward. I didn't come here to start something, he said, raising his voice just enough to carry. But something started anyway, and now we have to decide what we're going to do with it. He looked down at Buddy, then up at the crowd. They told us fear was a tool, that predators like this one could only learn through pain, that trust was weakness. But you're standing here because you don't believe that. Because one act of kindness wasn't erased. Because a creature built for terror remembered something better. The crowd remained still, listening. This isn't just about me. It's not just about Buddy. It's about what we choose to be: diplomats, scientists, leaders. If we can look at something taught to hate and offer it something else. Jack stepped back. That was enough. But it wasn't the end. Because the next day, the Academy voted. The Predator Conditioning Program was formally disbanded. Dozens of current specimens were transferred to rehabilitation facilities, many of which were now requesting human behavioral consultants. A new joint task force was formed focused on ethical re-socialization. Jack's name was listed on the advisory board, though he declined an official title. He didn't want to spend his life at a desk. Not when Buddy still flinched at slamming doors. 3 weeks later, Buddy bit someone. Not hard. Not to injure. But a second-year cadet from the Interstellar Enforcement Division decided to test dominance behavior by making sudden lunges during a group exercise. The third time he did it, Buddy lashed out, clamped his teeth lightly on the cadet's arm, and held him, unmoving, until Jack called him off. No blood was drawn. But the cadet wet himself. Jack didn't laugh. But only just. Buddy, on the other hand, sulked the rest of the day. He curled under Jack's bed, head buried under his own paws. When Jack finally coaxed him out, the cub lay on the floor and made that quiet huffing sound he only used when deeply unsettled. It's okay, Jack whispered. You warned him. Buddy whimpered once. then climbed onto the bed and buried his face in Jack's chest. Healing wasn't linear. The first true test came when Jack left the academy for 2 days. He had to testify before the Coalition Inquiry Board on Vendar Station, an administrative thing, more paperwork than politics. Still, they refused to let Buddy travel without a reinforced enclosure, and Jack refused to make him endure that again. So he left him behind. He worried the whole time. Buddy didn't eat the first day, refused to leave the sleeping mat they'd trained him to use. Security footage showed him lying still, occasionally getting up to sniff the corners of the room, then returning to curl back up. When Jack returned bag over one shoulder, travel jacket dusted with station soot, Buddy didn't run, didn't pounce, didn't growl. He just walked up slowly, nose twitching, sniffed the hem of Jack's sleeve, and let out the softest, slowest purr Jack had ever heard. Jack crouched, unzipped his jacket, and pulled out a half-crushed protein bar. "Miss me." Buddy ate it delicately, then flopped sideways against him and refused to move. A few months passed. Rumors spread that Buddy might be the first non-sapient creature classified as a companion diplomat, a living, breathing rebuttal to centuries of fear doctrine. It was mostly symbolic, but the symbolism mattered. Ambassadors visited. Some brought gifts. One Valari trade envoy, skeptical of the whole affair, asked dryly if the beast could do anything useful. Jack threw a stick across the garden path. Buddy retrieved it, dropped it at Jack's feet, sat. The envoy asked for a formal application packet. Later that week, Buddy learned how to offer a paw on command. The student body took to calling him the ambassador's dog. Jack didn't bother correcting them. Final assessments came during the interplanetary spring convocation. The Academy grounds were open to allied planetary systems for a formal parade, showcasing peaceful interspecies cooperation. Buddy had a place of honor in the student delegation, not in a cage, not on a leash. Walking beside Jack, head held high, scars bared and unhidden. There were still whispers, still doubt. But there was also awe. Especially when, halfway through the march, a burst of fireworks detonated early, loud, sharp, chaotic. Buddy froze. His ears flattened, muscles locked. Jack dropped to a knee, grabbed his face gently. "You're okay. It's noise. Just noise." Buddy trembled, but didn't bolt. Then, slowly, he pressed his forehead into Jack's. The crowd saw it, recorded it, shared it. That clip, the predator choosing not to run, not to fight, but to lean into trust, was replayed across 7 systems. When the parade resumed, Buddy walked straighter than he ever had. Graduation came quietly. Jack didn't wear formal colors. He didn't walk across a stage. He received his certification in a private ceremony, just outside the Academy Arboretum, with a few instructors, the Galari xenobiologist, and the Noran ethicist in attendance. He wore a worn travel pack over his shoulder. Buddy sat at his side, tail thumping against the stone floor. "Where will you go?" the Noran asked. Jack looked at her. "Wherever he can run free." "You're leaving?" "Not forever. Just for a while. He needs room. And I need less concrete. You've made an impression here." Jack glanced at Buddy, who was chewing on the edge of a graduation sash someone had dropped. "Yeah," he said. "We both did." The departure ship hummed on the launch pad. Jack paused at the top of the boarding ramp, turned back to look at the Academy dome one last time. The wind caught the flags above the East Tower. Beneath them, the student garden, once a site of fear, was now a space where younger students sat beneath trees and told stories about the cub who remembered. Buddy nudged him. Jack looked down. The cub was wearing a makeshift harness, not one forced onto him, one built for him, soft, flexible, tailored to comfort. He didn't need a leash anymore. But he walked beside Jack because he chose to. They boarded together. The hatch closed. And as the stars opened before them, Jack reached into his bag and pulled out one last protein bar. Unwrapped it slowly. Buddy sat waited, tail wagging. Jack smiled. "Still, your favorite?" Buddy didn't answer. But he didn't have to. He remembered. And sometimes, that was stronger than fear.